He shouted at her very loudly, "Listen, I am not the father of this pig." He kicked her and left the proposal party. In a lively college town, a young man named Jordan had earned a reputation that both fascinated and warned those around him. At 22, he was the quintessential heartthrob, charming, confident, and seemingly untouchable. His striking looks and captivating smile disarmed people, especially young women. They saw him as the perfect gentleman, a knight in shining armor. But that was only part of the picture. Beneath his handsome exterior was a side known to only a few. He was a ruthless player, someone who took pleasure in winning hearts only to abandon them. To him, love was a game, and every conquest was just another trophy on his shelf. Jordan had become something of a legend. He was the boy mothers warned their daughters about, and the type of man whose reputation left whispers in the hallways. Everyone knew he had a certain allure, a magnetism that drew women in, but they also knew that he rarely stayed. He had a chilling side, a coldness that revealed itself once he had taken what he wanted. It wasn't just his disinterest in commitment, it was the way he belittled and disregarded those who cared about him, especially those he deemed different. Deep down, Jordan was a racist, a fact that only those closest to him realized, though even they chose to ignore it or justify it as just his way. Enter Keira Knightley, an 18-year-old law student who was everything Jordan was not. She was sincere, hopeful, and full of ambition. Keira was new in town, focused on her studies, with dreams of changing the world. Her spirit was as captivating as her beauty. Her smile lit up a room, and her kindness touched everyone around her. She had always believed in the good in people, often to her detriment. When she met Jordan, she saw him through a different lens. She wasn't blinded by his charm. Rather, she genuinely believed there was a kind soul behind his flirtatious facade. She could sense that he had his flaws, but she also felt that maybe she could help him see past them. Their meeting was simple, almost fateful. One afternoon at a cafe near campus, Jordan spotted Keira laughing with friends. Something about her innocence and authenticity drew him in. It wasn't just her beauty, it was the way she didn't seem to care about the attention she was receiving. He approached her, his voice smooth, his intentions hidden behind a warm smile. Keira was initially hesitant. She had heard the rumors, knew of his reputation, but Jordan had a way of disarming her. His words were sweet, his attention intoxicating, and soon she found herself swept up in the idea of him. Over the next few weeks, they grew closer. Jordan showered her with compliments, sent flowers to her dorm, and made her feel like she was the only girl in the world. For Keira, it felt magical. She had never felt this way about anyone. She was cautious, but couldn't deny her feelings. Jordan seemed to be everything she had hoped for, a kind and understanding partner who made her feel special. Her friends warned her, reminding her of his history, but Keira believed that people could change. She saw something different in him, something vulnerable that he only showed to her. What Keira didn't know was that Jordan saw her as nothing more than a challenge, another conquest. To him, she was exciting because she was different, innocent, intelligent, and completely unaware of his true intentions. Keira's warmth and sincerity were exactly what Jordan sought in his targets. He enjoyed the chase, the thrill of winning over a girl like her. It was a game, and he was an expert player. He knew just what to say, how to act, and what emotions to fake to get her to fall for him. Despite her reservations, Keira found herself falling deeper into his world. Jordan took her to fancy dinners, whispered sweet nothings, and made promises he had no intention of keeping. For the first time in her life, Keira felt truly wanted. She allowed herself to dream of a future with him, of love, companionship, and maybe even family. It was all too perfect, too beautiful to be true. Yet she ignored the red flags, convincing herself that he was worth the risk. As the weeks turned into months, Kira and Jordan grew inseparable. She introduced him to her family, who were equally charmed, and he played his part perfectly, winning them over with practiced ease. Kira believed she had found her soulmate, someone who understood her, accepted her, and loved her. She poured her heart into the relationship, oblivious to the lies and deceit that lay beneath the surface. Jordan's past, his racist tendencies, his pattern of manipulation, all of it was hidden from her, masked by a carefully constructed image of the perfect boyfriend. But beneath his charming facade, Jordan remained the same. He had not changed. He had simply learned to hide his true self better. To him, Kira was just another girl, another heart to break. He knew that eventually he would tire of her, that the thrill would fade and he would move on, leaving her to pick up the pieces. But for now, he enjoyed the game, savoring each moment, each expression of love she gave him, knowing it would soon be over. For Kira, the relationship was everything she had dreamed of, a love that seemed pure and true. She was too young, too inexperienced to see through his lies. She believed in the fairy tale he had crafted for her, completely unaware that she was merely a pawn in his game. To her, Jordan was the one, the person she had been waiting for. She couldn't have imagined the heartbreak that awaited her, or the betrayal that would shatter her innocence. As they spent more time together, Jordan's mask began to slip. There were moments when she sensed a coldness, an indifference that made her uneasy. But she brushed it off, convincing herself that she was overthinking. Jordan was perfect, or so she wanted to believe. She ignored the small signs, the inconsistencies, the occasional flashes of cruelty that surfaced when he thought she wasn't looking. She told herself that everyone had flaws, that love was about accepting imperfections. Kira's friends grew increasingly worried. They had seen this before, had watched as other girls fell victim to Jordan's charm, only to be discarded when he lost interest. They tried to warn her, to make her see the truth, but Kira was in too deep. She trusted Jordan, believed in him, and refused to entertain the idea that he could hurt her. Her heart was too full of love, too blinded by his charm to see the reality. In the quiet moments, when Kira was alone, doubts crept in. She wondered if her friends were right, if there was something she was missing. But Jordan always knew how to pull her back, to make her feel special, cherished. He was an expert in manipulation, and she was the perfect victim, innocent, trusting, and completely unaware of his game. A night of illusions and heartbreak. Their relationship reached a turning point one fateful evening. It was a night of celebration, filled with laughter, music, and the carefree spirits of youth. Kira, swept up in the whirlwind of her feelings for Jordan, let her guard down even further that night. They laughed and drank together, a sense of freedom in the air as the boundaries of caution dissolved. Jordan encouraged her to relax, assuring her they were safe and that everything was perfect. Kira, feeling secure in his presence, allowed herself to believe that for once she could let go of her fears and just live in the moment. As the night went on, emotions ran high, and in the vulnerability of intoxication, Kira found herself letting go of her last reservations. The two of them ended up spending the night together, a memory she held close to her heart. To Kira, it felt like a promise, a shared connection that meant something deep and lasting. She woke up the next morning believing that they had shared something genuine, something that bonded them in a way words never could. It was a pivotal moment for her, a night she would always remember as one of warmth and closeness. Shortly afterward, life called her to another city, a temporary move for a special program in her law studies. She was excited about this new chapter in her academic life, and even though it meant some distance from Jordan, she was confident that their bond would withstand it. Kira spent her time studying hard, working towards her dreams, and reaching out to Jordan whenever she could. She called, texted, and left messages, each one filled with the hope that he would respond and that they could maintain the connection she held so dear. But to her dismay, Jordan became increasingly unresponsive. At first, she dismissed it as him being busy, but as the weeks turned into months, a painful truth began to gnaw at her heart. Kira was torn between her love for him and the silence that was growing louder with each unanswered message. She missed him deeply, wondering what she might have done wrong, why he was ignoring her, and whether he still felt the same. Her heart ached with every attempt to connect with him, only to be met with cold indifference. She clung to the hope that things would change, that he would explain it all once she returned. Little did she know that Jordan had already moved on, that their night together meant nothing to him, and that her pain was merely a consequence of his careless, callous nature. 9 months later, with a heart still full of hope and a deep secret she couldn't wait to share, Kira returned to her hometown. She planned a surprise party, envisioning it as the perfect moment to rekindle their relationship. She believed that this grand gesture would make Jordan see her love and dedication, would show him that they could build a future together. With every detail meticulously arranged, she invited her closest friends and family, all of whom had watched her go. Through months of silent suffering, clinging to a love that seemed one-sided. At the height of the celebration, Kira called Jordan to the center of the room. She took a deep breath, got down on one knee, and professed her love for him. She revealed her secret, her heart pounding with both fear and excitement as she shared that she was pregnant, that he was about to become a father. Her words hung in the air, filled with hope and vulnerability. But instead of joy, Jordan's face twisted in disbelief and shock. He recoiled, demanding that she repeat herself, as if he couldn't fathom what he was hearing. The room fell silent, all eyes on the two of them. Kira, now nervous, repeated her words, hoping he would understand, would accept her and their child with open arms. But Jordan's reaction was a cruel blow. He shouted, denying any involvement, accusing her of infidelity with a heartlessness that shattered her completely. In a voice filled with contempt, he claimed that she must have been with someone else, that there was no way he was the father of her child. Kira, stunned and humiliated, felt her world collapse around her. Desperate to make him understand, she fell to her knees, begging him to believe her, to remember the night they had shared. She reached out, her hands trembling as she touched his feet, her voice choked with sobs. But Jordan's response was cold and merciless. He kicked her away as if she were nothing, leaving her crumpled on the floor as he walked out without a second glance. In that moment, Kira's world was forever changed. She lost everything she had held dear, her love, her dignity, and even in the midst of that unbearable heartbreak, the child she had carried. She was left alone, broken, feeling a pain so profound it seemed as if nothing could ever mend her heart. That night, Kira experienced a sorrow she would carry with her for years to come, a grief that would drive her to seek a justice no one else could give her. From that moment on, Kira was no longer the innocent girl who had loved without reservation. She was now a woman hardened by betrayal, ready to forge a path, not of love, but of justice. Silent distance, Kira's pain and confusion. In the months that followed her departure to the new city, Kira's life transformed into a mix of dedication and uncertainty. The law program kept her busy. It was a rigorous course that demanded all her focus and energy. She threw herself into her studies, hoping that the distractions would help her cope with the growing distance she felt with Jordan. Every night, after long hours of reading and research, Kira would reach for her phone, her heart swelling with anticipation as she sent him messages and left voicemails. She talked about her day, shared little anecdotes, and expressed how much she missed him, hoping for even a small reply that would reassure her that their bond was still alive. But days turned into weeks, and then weeks into months, with no response from Jordan. She felt her heart sink a little more with every unanswered call, every message that went unseen. At first, she tried to make excuses for him, convincing herself that he must be busy with his own life. Maybe he had exams, or maybe there were personal challenges he hadn't shared with her. After all, he had been so kind and attentive before. Surely there was a logical explanation for his silence. Kira clung to this belief, telling herself that once she returned, everything would go back to the way it had been. Yet a part of her couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong. She began to question herself, wondering if she had done something to upset him. Had she been too needy, too distant, or too focused on her studies? Self-doubt gnawed at her, creating an internal conflict that added to her already heavy workload. Her friends noticed her change in mood, how she had become quieter, less present, as if something was weighing her down. Whenever they asked, Kira brushed it off with a forced smile, not wanting anyone to know about her silent heartbreak. She didn't want to admit that her perfect love story was falling apart. Kira's nights were the hardest. Lying alone in her room, she replayed memories of their time together, holding on to every word, every touch, every look they had shared. She wondered if she had imagined the love in his eyes, the warmth in his touch. Her mind swung between hope and despair, between believing he still loved her and fearing that he had moved on without her. She even started rereading their old messages, clinging to the words he had once said, looking for reassurance in the echoes of a love that now felt distant and cold. Her studies began to suffer as her focus wavered. Her professors noticed her distraction, her occasional missed deadlines, and the slight drop in her usual enthusiasm. But Kira couldn't talk about it, couldn't tell anyone that the man she had trusted with her heart had suddenly turned into a ghost. She was trapped in a painful limbo, waiting for a sign, any sign that he still cared. Eventually, the loneliness grew too heavy to bear. Kira reached out to Jordan's friends, subtly asking if he was all right, if they had heard from him. Their answers were vague, evasive, leaving her with even more questions than before. It felt like a conspiracy, as if everyone else knew something she didn't. She was left in the dark, with only her doubts and fears to keep her company. In the quiet moments, Kira tried to console herself, telling herself that perhaps this was a test of their love, a challenge they would overcome together. She believed in the strength of what they had shared, in the promises he had made. She even began planning their future together in her mind, imagining what it would be like to return to him, to finally reunite and share her joy and love openly. She told herself that the silence would make their reunion even sweeter, that the waiting would be worth it. But deep down, a darker reality began to settle. She couldn't shake the feeling that perhaps Jordan had never truly cared, that their relationship had always been one-sided. It was a thought she couldn't bear to entertain, and so she pushed it down, burying it beneath her love for him, choosing hope over despair. She still clung to the memories of his affection, to the warmth that had once been there, hoping it would be enough to keep her going. By the time Kira's program ended, she was emotionally exhausted, worn thin by the months of unanswered calls, the messages that had gone unread, and the silence that had become a constant presence in her life. But despite everything, she held on to the belief that once she returned, Jordan would be there, ready to embrace her and make up for the lost time. She had waited so long, endured so much, and was ready to forgive him, to put everything behind them and start anew. With hope still flickering in her heart, Kira returned to her hometown, eager to surprise Jordan, to show him that she was willing to fight for their love. Even after all the silence, she was ready to put her pain behind her, to focus on building a future with him. She couldn't wait to share the news of their child, the life they had created together, a symbol of the love she believed still existed between them. But little did Kira know, the silence had only been the beginning of a heartbreak far deeper than she could ever have imagined. She was about to face a reality that would shatter her illusions and force her to confront the painful truth she had been avoiding. The reunion she dreamed of would not come to pass, and the love she had held onto so desperately was about to be exposed as nothing more than a cruel illusion. The shocking revelation, a mother's hope. Crushed. Returning home after 9 long months, Kira was filled with a bittersweet mixture of excitement and apprehension. She had carefully planned a surprise for Jordan, envisioning a beautiful reunion where all her silent fears would be washed away in his embrace. She had organized a small gathering, inviting their close friends and family, setting the stage for what she imagined to be the most memorable night of their lives. Every detail was meticulously arranged, the decorations, the music, the food, all of it symbolizing her hope and love. But the biggest surprise was yet to come, a secret she carried with both pride and trepidation. She was going to tell Jordan that he was going to be a father, that together they were about to start a family. As the evening unfolded, Kira's excitement grew, and when Jordan finally arrived, her heart swelled with anticipation. She had waited so long for this moment, endured so much silence and heartache, but now she was ready to let it all go. She walked over to him, her eyes bright with love and hope, and, surrounded by friends and family, she took a deep breath, got down on one knee, and confessed her feelings. She told him how much she had missed him, how she had dreamed of this moment every single day, and finally, with a trembling voice, she shared the news. She was pregnant, and he was going to be a father. For a moment, there was silence. She looked up at him, searching his face for a sign of joy, or at least understanding. But what she saw in his eyes was not love or happiness. It was shock, disbelief, and something far more painful. He took a step back, his face twisting with a look of confusion and anger, as if her words had insulted him. Kira's heart began to sink as he asked her, his voice hard and accusing, "Can you repeat that?" She swallowed, repeating her words softly, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. She hoped that maybe he just needed a moment to process, that his reaction was simply a response to the overwhelming news. But instead of the joyful embrace she had imagined, Jordan's response was cold and brutal. He accused her of lying, of being unfaithful, insisting that the child couldn't be his. His voice rose as he shouted, claiming that she must have been with someone else, that he would never be responsible for her or her baby. In that moment, Kira's world shattered. She felt as though the ground had been pulled out from under her, and she was free-falling into an abyss of despair and humiliation. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. It was as if the man she loved had transformed into a stranger before her eyes. Desperate to make him understand, Kira tried to reach him, tears streaming down her face. She pleaded with him, reminded him of their night together, of the promises he had made. She fell to her knees, her voice choked with sobs, as she begged him to believe her, to see the truth in her eyes. She reached out, touching his feet in a final act of desperation, hoping that somehow he would remember the love they had shared and the life they had created together. But Jordan's response was colder than she could have imagined. He kicked her away, his face twisted in disdain, and without another word, he turned and walked out of her life, leaving her crumpled on the floor, broken and humiliated in front of everyone she held dear. In that moment, Kira felt a pain so deep it threatened to consume her. The humiliation, the betrayal, and the heartache were too much to bear. As she lay there, clutching her stomach, her sobs turned to cries of agony. The emotional trauma, combined with the shock and physical distress, was too much for her body to endure. She could feel something inside her break, a sharp, searing pain that left her gasping for air. The child she had carried, the symbol of the love she thought she shared with Jordan, was gone. She had lost everything in that single cruel moment, the man she loved, the future she had dreamed of, and the innocent life she had hoped to bring into the world. Kira was left alone in a sea of pain and emptiness. Her friends and family tried to comfort her, but nothing could ease the ache that now filled her heart. She felt hollow, as if a part of her soul had been ripped away, leaving behind a wound that would never heal. The man she had once loved, the one she had trusted with her heart, had destroyed her in the most heartless way possible. In that dark hour, Kira felt as though her entire world had collapsed, and there was nothing left for her but the bitter ashes of a love that had been nothing more than an illusion. But as she lay there, shattered and broken, something began to stir within her. The pain, the betrayal, and the humiliation ignited a fire deep inside her, a fierce, unrelenting determination to seek justice, to make him pay for the agony he had caused her. She was no longer the naive girl who had believed in fairy tales and happy endings. She was a woman forged in heartbreak, a woman ready to reclaim her power and fight back against the man who had taken everything from her. Rising from the ashes, Kira's determination for justice. In the weeks that followed her devastating loss, Kira found herself grappling with a pain that seemed endless, an emptiness that nothing could fill. The memories of that night haunted her, the cruel rejection, the unbearable humiliation, and the tragic loss of her unborn child. She felt broken, her heart shattered into pieces that seemed impossible to mend. But slowly, out of the ashes of her despair, a new resolve began to form. Her pain and sorrow transformed into something powerful, something that drove her forward with a fierce sense of purpose. Kira would not let Jordan's betrayal define her life. She was no longer the innocent, trusting girl who had fallen for his charm. She was a woman on a mission, determined to reclaim her life and seek justice. Kira channeled her grief into her studies, pushing herself harder than ever before. She threw herself into her law books, spending countless hours at the library, immersing herself in every case study and legal concept she could find. The fire inside her grew stronger with each passing day, fueling her drive to excel. Her professors noticed the change. She was no longer just a promising student. She was a force to be reckoned with, her mind sharp and her determination unwavering. She rose to the top of her class, her focus unbreakable as she honed her skills, preparing for a career that she now saw as more than just a profession. It was her path to justice, her way of taking control and making sure that no one else could ever hurt her the way Jordan had. As Kira grew stronger, her vision for the future became clear. She would become a top lawyer, someone who could stand up to those who thought they could play with others' lives without consequence. She was fueled by the memory of what she had endured, the betrayal that had nearly destroyed her, and the innocent life that had been lost. Her drive became her shield, her focus, her weapon, and the fire of her grief, the fuel that kept her moving forward. Kira transformed her. Heartbreak into a relentless pursuit of justice, not just for herself, but for anyone who had ever been wronged. 5 years passed, and Kira became one of the most respected lawyers in her city. She had built a reputation as a fierce advocate for justice, known for her sharp mind and unyielding resolve. She had dedicated herself to helping others, fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Her life was filled with purpose, and though the scars of her past remained, they had become a source of strength, a reminder of how far she had come. But beneath the success and the accolades, there was a lingering desire for closure, a need to confront the man who had set her on this path. Finally, the day arrived when Kira was ready to take the next step. She filed a case against Jordan, the man who had shattered her life. She gathered every piece of evidence, every memory, every painful detail, and built her case with the same precision and dedication she had given to her career. It was time for him to face the consequences of his actions, to understand the pain he had caused, and to see that he could no longer escape justice. Kira was no longer the broken girl he had left behind. She was a warrior, ready to confront the past and take back what was rightfully hers. The tables turn, a court summons. After 5 years, Jordan, by now, had long forgotten the girl he had once used and discarded. He had moved on, living his life as though nothing had ever happened, convinced that his past would never catch up to him. His life was filled with new conquests, new faces, and a never-ending string of superficial relationships that meant nothing to him. He had buried the memory of Kira, dismissing her as just another girl who had fallen for his charm, just another chapter he had closed without a second thought. Little did he know that his carefree life was about to come crashing down around him. One ordinary day, a letter arrived, a court summons. Jordan opened it with casual disinterest, expecting nothing out of the ordinary, but as he read the contents, his face turned pale. It was a legal case filed against him by Kira Knightley. He felt a chill run down his spine as he realized that the past he thought he had left behind had returned, and this time there was no escaping it. The shock and fear gripped him as he realized that Kira, the girl he had once humiliated and abandoned, was now a successful lawyer, a formidable force who had come back to demand justice. The courtroom was packed on the day of the trial, the tension thick as Kira entered, her presence commanding respect and admiration. She was no longer the naive girl he had known. She was a powerful woman, poised and composed, her gaze steely and unwavering. Jordan felt a wave of fear as he looked at her, realizing that he was now at her mercy, facing the consequences of his actions. Kira presented her case with a calm and confidence that left no room for doubt. She recounted every detail, every painful memory, painting a picture of betrayal and heartbreak that moved the court. She spoke not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been wronged, standing tall and resolute as she demanded justice. Jordan tried to defend himself, tried to justify his actions, but his words fell flat against the weight of Kira's truth. He was no longer the charming young man he had once been. He was now a desperate figure, exposed and vulnerable, his past laid bare for all to see. The court saw through his lies, his shallow excuses, and in the end, justice was served. The judge handed down a sentence, a 5-year prison term, a punishment fitting for the man who had thought he could escape accountability. Jordan begged for forgiveness, falling to his knees as he pleaded with Kira, even going so far as to touch her feet in desperation, mirroring the way she had once begged him. But Kira's response was as cold as the rejection she had faced years before. She looked him in the eye and said, "The world doesn't need men like you." As he was led away in handcuffs, Kira felt a weight lift from her heart. She had faced her past, confronted her pain, and taken back her power. The journey had been long and painful, but in the end, she had emerged stronger, her spirit unbroken, her heart healed. The revenge she had once longed for was no longer about him. It was about her journey, her transformation, and her ability to rise above the darkness he had brought into her life. She had finally found closure, and with it, the freedom to live a life filled with purpose, love, and peace. Revenge, served cold, a heartless man's despair. The courtroom doors closed behind Jordan, and for the first time he felt the sting of helplessness. The charm and confidence he had once wielded were useless now. He had thought himself invincible, above consequence, untouchable. But now, facing 5 years in prison, he was forced to confront the reality of his actions. He had begged Kira for mercy, tried to appeal to the emotions he had once manipulated, but she remained unmoved. Kira stood firm, no longer swayed by the man who had once shattered her. Her gaze was cold, a stark reminder that she no longer saw him as anything but a shadow of her past, a lesson in what she had overcome. As Jordan was led away in handcuffs, his cries echoed down the sterile halls, but they were empty sounds to Kira. She had heard those pleas before, in her own voice 5 years ago, when she had begged him to believe in their love and their child. This was her moment of justice, the conclusion of a journey that had been filled with pain, resilience, and growth. She watched as he disappeared from view. The weight of his betrayal lifted from her shoulders. Her heart, once broken and bruised, was now stronger, filled not with bitterness but with a quiet strength. Jordan's time in prison was a harsh contrast to the life he once led. The power he had wielded over others was gone, replaced by isolation and regret. The days were long and cold, the walls of his cell closing in as he grappled with the reality of his own cruelty. Each day, he was haunted by the memory of Kira's face, not the girl he had once charmed, but the powerful woman who had brought him to justice. The arrogance he had once carried dissolved, replaced by a deep and gnawing emptiness. Kira had shown him that he was not untouchable, and now the life he had destroyed had come full circle, leaving him with nothing but regret. A new chapter. Kira's happily ever after. With the past finally behind her, Kira stepped into a new chapter of her life, one filled with peace, purpose, and love. She had endured so much, but through her journey, she had transformed her heartbreak into strength and her pain into wisdom. Her work as a lawyer became a calling, a way to fight for others who couldn't fight for themselves. Her reputation grew, and she was respected not only for her skill, but for the compassion she brought to each case. Kira became an advocate, a voice for those who had been silenced, and her story inspired many who had been through similar trials. In time, Kira's heart opened once again, this time to a man who understood her worth and cherished her deeply. She met James Root, a gentle and principled judge, who saw her not as someone to control or charm, but as an equal, a partner. James was everything Jordan had not been, kind, respectful, and genuinely committed to justice. Their love was a quiet, steady bond, built on mutual respect and understanding. For the first time, Kira felt truly safe, loved not for what she could give, but for who she was. Together, Kira and James built a life filled with happiness and family. They settled in Miami, where they raised 3 beautiful children in a home where love and respect were at the core of everything they did. Kira often thought about the path that had led her here, the journey from heartbreak to healing. Her past was still a part of her, but it no longer defined her. She had taken the pain and turned it into a foundation for a life she was proud of. A life that honored the strength and resilience she had fought so hard to reclaim. Kira's story became a testament to the power of transformation, a reminder that even the deepest scars could heal, and that with courage one could find happiness again. Her journey was a cycle of loss, revenge, justice, and redemption, culminating in a life that was truly her own. And in the warmth of her family and the purpose of her work, she found a happiness that was all the more profound for the struggles that had come before.